Welcome to Elon Beyond the Bricks, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of Elon University to explore the stories, ideas, and innovations shaping our community. Each episode will talk to individuals who are making a difference in the world and explore the values and experiences that make Elon so special. We hope you'll find stories that inspire and challenge you, and perhaps even spark new ideas of your own. Join us as we dive into conversations that go beyond the classroom and into the lives of our remarkable students, alumni, parents, faculty, and staff. Thanks for joining.
Hello and welcome to Elon Beyond the Bricks. I'm your host, Connie, president here at Elon University, and I'm really excited today because we're talking with Dr. Alexis Franzese. She is the department chair and associate professor for Elon's Department of Sociology and Anthropology. Her academic training, teaching, and research all meet at the intersection of sociology and psychology. And she has a special focus on issues of self, identity, and well-being. She is currently conducting research on authenticity and identity within travel and tourism, and she's got a special focus on Disney. So that's going to be fun to talk about today. Alexis has a forthcoming co-edited volume called Why the Magic Matters, Discovering Disney as a Laboratory for Learning. Her co-editor is Dr. Jill Peterfesso, just up the street at Guilford College. She earned a bachelor's degree from Union College and 2 doctoral degrees from Duke, one in sociology and one in clinical psychology. She loves teaching others about the science of happiness and tries to incorporate her knowledge into her very full life with 4 kids, 2 dogs, and a curious cat. So I have to ask about the cat. What makes the cat curious?
So much, but he goes over and watches whatever people are doing and does this little head tilt. And he just goes from room to room, following all the people around in the house and just seeing what they're up to.
Like, what are you doing? What is that? That's fun. Alexis, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Why don't you start us off by just giving us a little background about yourself and what you've been working on since, and about maybe your time at Elon since 2011.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on the show today. I'm really happy to be here. So yes, I arrived at Elon in 2011 and I jumped right into all that we have to offer at Elon. As soon as I got here, decided that I wanted to teach within our core curriculum and developed my Science of Happiness course for that. And Elon's Global Education Center, a few years after I arrived, really wanted to develop more Study USA courses. And having developed this core capstone class called the Science of Happiness and thinking about the Study USA possibilities, I thought, where is the happiest place? Well, it is Disney. So I worked on designing a class to take students to Disney to kind of unpack how Disney creates, curates, sells happiness and why it resonated with so many people. And then in years after that, I had the opportunity to develop some other cool classes, for example, around my interest in authenticity. And most recently, my scholarship in authenticity and Disney has really kind of converged together.
Why? So let's start there, because I've always said Disney has got the science down on creating this magical experience, to use their own words. So what is it about Disney? Give us some more of what you've discovered about Disney.
There is so much. So a lot of people who enjoy Disney feel a very strong sense of belonging there. They operate in a way that for people who are experiencing the parks, that feels inclusive to them. They feel like that their needs and their wants have been thought of and attended to. So it's a place where people go and they actually do quite a bit of labor while they're there. That's one of the things that comes up in Why the Magic Matters. There's a lot of invisible labor that people do in pursuit of the leisure of Disney, but Disney does give people a sense of belonging when they're in the parks.
I know I definitely feel that way. And because with 2 kids in tow, I always thought they were one step ahead of me. Like they had thought about what I was going to need, where I needed to park the stroller, how to keep us entertained in line, that they had thought through all those things. Well, what about the students? I know the students come back from that experience and talk about it. So, and I know the class enrolls students from across all majors. So what are some of the takeaways students are having when they take your Disney class?
Oh, there's so much in that. We spend a lot of time talking in the class about representation and the representation and to some degree cultural appropriation that happens at Epcot. We talk about who's not in the parks. The cost of a Disney vacation is very, very high. And so we talk in the class about who does not have access to that. And a lot of those issues of representation are central to the course.
Are there practices? I know you do a lot of well-being work with our students in class, and then I know you've run workshops and other kinds of engagements around well-being. We have a major effort at Elon called Healthy You, and this sense of well-being is front and center in that work. So tell me a little bit about what you've learned about practices and what you encourage others to do as they search for well-being in their life.
That's a really big question.
I'm asking you the hard questions today.
I like it. We have a cultural narrative that is telling us that we should be happy all the time. I think social media has absolutely contributed to this because what we are seeing on social media is the highlights of people's lives. And so in constant exposure to this, we think that's how our lives should look. The Happiness Scholarship has historically shown that there's a U-shaped curve in happiness, whereby our happiness is kind of high in adolescence, childhood, dips down. The bottom of that curve is around age 40 when a lot of people are doing so much caregiving for children, for aging parents. And then what we know is that happiness goes up again. But what we're seeing across countries is that there's a dip in the happiness levels of people that are women who are age 18 to 25. And I think what accounts for that is social media. I think female identifying people are very prone to kind of internalizing the images that we see in social media and thinking that they should be doing more, they should do better. But we're all doing enough. And this messaging that we should be happy all the time is not only not realistic, it wouldn't be sustainable. Like that is not how we are wired. And happiness is also something that we experience in contrast. Without kind of those difficult experiences, we're not going to actually know when we are experiencing contentment.
Yeah, we had Arthur Brooks here on campus talking about a book he recently published with Oprah Winfrey. And it's called Build the Life You Want. And it's really focused on that 40 plus person that you're describing, where the research shows that dip. And one of the arguments that they both make is that you don't really know happiness unless you know unhappiness, and that it would be an impossibility to be happy all the time, and that we shouldn't strive to be happy all the time. Can you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really feel like nobody can achieve that goal. And I don't even think that life would be meaningful. What we know really matters for a sense of happiness is purpose and meaning and the ability to make meaning. And for a lot of people, the experiences where we make meaning and find purpose actually come through hardship. It's through our challenges and the difficulties and the things that we overcome that we realize how we want to spend our time, what a life worth living looks like and feels like to us. So in the absence of those hardships, I don't think we'd actually even have a sense of what matters and then be able to pursue what matters.
When we do face hardship, and I'm grateful you said that, because a lot of times we work at Elon nonstop with 18 to 22-year-olds. And a lot of times I'm sharing with them that, about a life moment where things didn't go like I thought they would, or, I had a sudden barrier challenge, and how important that moment was. I think that's a hard truth. So are there ways, and I don't have any research in this area, but I do tell students, I'll say that in my experience, that there are ways that making sure I didn't spend too much time alone is really important, to make sure you get enough rest and eat 3 meals. I have an acronym that I use, HALT. Don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, that I share with the students. Are there things in your bucket around well-being that you could share with us today?
Absolutely. So 2 things that I'll say. I want to normalize the fact that everybody gets the curveballs. I actually have a file folder called curveballs, and I just organize the emails that are curveballs, the files that are curveballs. They go there because they happen. And I think our work is to integrate them into our experiences and figure out how to learn from that lesson, because lessons are especially costly. We pay twice if we don't learn. And so figuring out, okay, this happened, sitting with the emotion, like this is hard. Like when we have hard things, trying to deny that they're hard isn't going to serve us. Being present, accepting the difficulty, and then realizing that everyone has it. This is the one we have right now, and figuring out how to make meaning, how to push past that. I do think the movement towards self-care that we see going on right now is critically important. In my own reflections and practices, I'm noticing that I so heavily book my time such that when I get things done, I'm experiencing relief and not celebration. And I believe that we are here to contribute and to enjoy life. And I want to have celebration when I get things done, instead of just feeling like, whew, got that off my list. And so how, in structuring one's time, can you allow a spaciousness so that you can enjoy when something is completed versus just feeling like you have to move on to the next thing?
One of the things I know that you've talked about in other settings and I'm curious about is the power of reflection and the importance of reflection. Elon is known for engaged and experiential learning, but I know we use reflection as part of that engagement. So can you talk about reflection and especially post-student life, student life and post-student life, how that can play a role in our well-being?
Absolutely. So a few years back, as a scholar through our Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning, I did some research about contemplative pedagogy and bringing mindfulness practices into the classroom. And that could come in kind of more dramatic forms of very intentional practices, but could also just come from moments of pause and reflection. I read years back that we don't kind of do thinking as much as we used to because thinking doesn't look productive. And we have this movement towards productivity and the things that result from our efforts. But
APIs. Like everything has a measurement to it.
Right, right. And there's value in that. And that helps move us forward. And at the same time, thinking needs to occur. So as faculty, how do we create spaces in our teaching for thinking? And it might not look productive on the surface. Quiet moments in the classroom. And I believe that it can happen through stillness, actually, or through movement. But just a moment for people to kind of digest, integrate, really think about what they're learning, the applications of it, rather than just so quickly moving on to the next thing.
I want to ask you about something that happened I recently joined a class on the Holocaust journey in Krakow, Poland. And it was very moving. We were in Auschwitz and Birkenau, and you can imagine you're standing on these places and the students, it was a lot of tension, and it was like a moment where you're realizing, you're at the place where over 1 million people were murdered. And it just so happened that these students, it's a history class, but we had 5 or 6 that happened to be in some of Elon's a cappella groups, and they would start humming or singing. I don't know, some of them, started singing just a few notes of Alleluia in this very pivotal moment when we were in Birkenau. And I'm wondering about how things like singing and exercise, movement, and how that intersects with happiness or processing, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So the first thing that came to my mind when you were sharing that story is the concept of awe. And we can have awe in really positive, observing really positive things, but also observing really horrific things. And scholars talk about experiencing awe when we don't have the ability to cognitively accommodate what we are seeing. Like we're taking in something that we have never seen before that our brain doesn't actually even know how to organize. So I think in that moment, the students were having a moment of awe of the horrific things that they were thinking about having occurred on that sacred ground.
It was really moving moment. You know, I'm just going to say this, Alexis, that I had another moment, and it was during COVID, and we had sent everyone home. This is in the early weeks. And I was still coming into the office because it was giving me comfort to come to the office, like I could control something from my desk. But the campus was completely empty. And it was in April, 10th. It's like an April day. And I'm just here to tell you that there's something about a college campus that is completely empty like that moment. And it was so moving that I asked the staff. We did have one person managing the buildings that was here, and I asked him if he could ring the bell, to just ring the bell. And so he rang it for me, and it rang about 20, 30 times. And then I said, okay, it was a moment of awe, I think. Like I needed that bell to ring. And just to hear that bell ringing across a completely empty campus was what you're describing. So it's helpful to think about these really emotional moments and how we work to process them. And that I know happens in our learning environment here, you know, and so very good.
And to go back, I know we were just in a very kind of sad space, but to go back to Disney, one of the things I actually do in my class is we do some behind the scenes tours and go into the parks when they're almost empty. And it is a very surreal experience in a similar way to what you just described for campus. Of course, it's different because campus was empty because of this event that was going on worldwide. But when we go into spaces where there's this usually profound collective energy that animates so much, and then you go there and it's not there, we start to realize, I think it actually gives us some clarity on what we value in life. And what's important to us. So a campus could be the most beautiful campus in the world, but if there's not students moving around and faculty and staff and all of the good stuff that can happen on a campus happening, it just feels empty and vacant.
Yes, that the mission is the heart, and you really feel that when you're on a space where the mission is not active, right?
Yes.
Very good. So I know one of your major areas of study is authenticity. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time. I know Disney has provided a unique platform for you on studying authenticity. So talk a little bit about that too.
Absolutely. So authenticity is something I have been passionate about since I was probably 12 years old. And
Did something happen at 12 years old?
Puberty, like growing up, all of that. Yes. And what I started to learn as I studied it in graduate school, both of my dissertations at Duke were on the topic of authenticity, is that age 11, according to Susan Harder and colleagues, is the age that we actually start to think about true self and false self behavior. When we start to notice, like, yeah, this feels like this is me, this is real, this is genuine, or ooh, this isn't who I really, really am. And so, you know, that I felt that when I was 11, 12 years old. I remember at that time, an insult that other kids would sling was being a poser. And I remember thinking, I will be anything, but I don't ever want to be a poser in my life. I want to be whoever I am. And I knew then that it might cost me, and I might say in some ways it has. But there's other ways it's contributed to me having a life of meaning and purpose. So when I got to Duke and I did my first dissertation in the sociology department, it was looking at about how social structural position, our demographic characteristics, how those might make it easier or harder for us to be authentic. I actually do believe that it's a privilege to be authentic, and that individuals with marginalized identities don't have equal access to that privilege. We can think about how central our gender identities, our sexual identities, our racial ethnic identities are to who we are and authentic expression. And considering that if people don't get to express that and have to repress or submerge that, the cost to mental health. So a few years later, when I was working on my psychology dissertation, I looked at the mental health consequences of inauthenticity, and no surprise, found that inauthenticity was associated with elevated levels of depression and anxiety. So I've carried on with that work in my time at Elon. I've looked at authenticity in relation to many variables. Actually did a study during the pandemic about authenticity during the pandemic and kind of the different demands that the pandemic created with working at home and those different settings. And while I'd always thought about authenticity as an individual difference variable, when I started studying Disney, I was like, authenticity is relevant here in two different ways. Number one, I was interested in the degree to which people feel they can be authentic at Disney. That some of our earlier themes that we were talking about, the sense of belonging people have at Disney, feeling I belong here. There's a place for me at Disney, because there are people who feel there's no better place where they have a greater sense of belonging.
I see them
Disney.
On the airplanes.
Right.
Yes, they're traveling with their Disney gear.
Yes, their matching shirts, their ears, their pins, they've got it all. But there's also the question of authenticity at Disney and in the parks. I've been saying for years that authenticity, Disney is the most genuine make-believe imaginable. So Disney is authentic simulation. And in fact, in the book, Why the Magic Matters, it's organized around 4 different dialectical pairings I identified that are relevant to Disney. Authenticity and simulation, leisure and labor, nostalgia and innovation, and magic and strategy. And Disney operates at the intersection of these tensions. Like the contradictions that actually positively informs how Disney operates and makes it so compelling. But I love studying authenticity at Disney because they really do a phenomenal job on making the fake feel genuine. And if you are able to go to Disney and suspend disbelief, the experience is absolutely magical. It truly is.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your research and insights. I always enjoy listening to your ideas and just hearing about the impact of your own life and the intersection of your own life with the work that you're doing. So I'm really grateful you took time to join us on Beyond the Bricks.
Thank you so much. It's been fun.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for listening today.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Elon Beyond the Bricks. Please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and leave a review to help others discover the conversations that matter. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.